Welcome to Star Citizen and the preview and analysis of the medical gameplay, background and history of the Death of a Spaceman mechanic. We finally have certainty about the upcoming permadeath mechanic, as well as all the information that reveals the death of a spaceman. And the permanent death, as it has often been suspected and conjured up, will not directly exist at all. But let's start step by step. With the Loremaker's Guide to Regeneration, there have recently been further and deeper insights into one of the core mechanics in Star Citizen. With the imminent launch of the medical gameplay as a special type of permadeath mechanic in the medium term, which is described in Star Citizen as the death of a spaceman, we will notice extensive and very significant changes, and at the same time adapt our own way of playing in Star Citizen considerably. As usual, we analyze all known information and data for you connected to the current development, the planned areas on the roadmap, as well as information and statements from CIG, and thereby give an outlook on how this will ultimately affect the persistent universe, as well as the single-player expansion Squadron 42, and of course how we assess these effects. During the development of this space epic, which so far still presents itself as a fascinating alpha epic, meaningful consequences for the death of a player were, already in very early development phases, a frequently communicated and above all controversial topic, which was, however, to become reality at some point. A dangerous universe was to be created in which the decisions of the players were to be given real weight. Surviving adventures and risks unscathed was to be a challenging experience, with our character playing as central a role as our ship, with all its layered elements and deep mechanics. Chris Roberts therefore announced in October 2020 that the current development of the alpha version of Star Citizen had progressed sufficiently far that the active development of the Death of a Spaceman mechanic could now begin, which we will now already be experiencing with alpha version 3.15. And because of this new mechanic, it is important that the players are able to survive. And because of this new mechanic, it is necessary to explain upcoming terms, mechanics and systems that we will be confronted with daily in the future in the verse. But does permanent death exist, and to what extent do bugs or systematic player death affect the first stage of this new mechanic? Is Star Citizen already advanced enough to implement permanent death in a fair and just way? We can now answer these questions to a large extent if we look at the upcoming medical gameplay in detail and link the current development status to it. During the final development phase of the Death of a Spaceman mechanic, it was decided that players would benefit significantly more from being able to return from the dead, even if their avatar's body is completely lost. In other words, a clear rejection of a conventional and strict permadeath mechanic. The background to this decision are various scenarios that would be frustrating for large parts of the gaming community, and of course would also impose an extreme entry barrier on beginners. Of course, it would be understandable and justifiable for diligent NPC emergency teams to bring injured players back to civilization after accidents or other lethal events. However, in this context there are also extensive situations in which even the bravest ambulance pilots would not have been able to rescue the players in a comprehensible and credible way. After burning up in the sun, the direct acquaintance with torpedoes of size 9 or a fulminant explosion on board a ship, a rescue would be impossible, even in the 30th century. But all these cases would have been declared as permadeath, after which the respective players would have been forced to hand over everything to their relatives, successor characters, which would have had the effect of an almost complete loss of reputations, financial resources and long-term advantages. And we all know more than enough situations where such scenarios are due to bugs and current errors in the game. This is simply not compatible with the current flow in the game. The consequence of a strict and classic permadeath mechanic would have been an extremely passive, reserved and above all frustrated basic attitude on the part of the players in the medium term, as well as an extreme and almost insurmountable barrier to entry. But what systems and mechanics will we see instead? The good old respawn button without effects? No, not that either. Small spoiler! As we had already gathered a few months ago from our analysis of the data situation, as well as the basic gameplay developments, we will experience a game mechanic here that can most simply be described as a cloning, whereby players can bring their avatars back from death, but must be clearly differentiated, and we must take into account many different restrictions and limitations in this consideration. For it is not a classic cloning either. Since this system has some new elements and fundamental deviations from a classic cloning system, which we already know from some other games, we will go a little deeper into this comprehensive background mechanic. For the upcoming Deat of a Spaceman mechanic, there are the following 5 basic specifications which have given this system a development structure. The memories of one's own avatar are to be passed on through the process, whereby a pure biological copy is out of the question, as all experiences and memories would simply not exist. In addition, a kind of immortality should be excluded, whereby the effect must diminish over time. The way in which an avatar perished is also of central importance, since the circumstance of death should be directly and noticeably reflected in a new body. So if one has been blown up, we will see scars and cybernetic limbs in the medium term, lasting effects that will often not only be beneficial. The aging of the character will also be reflected, whereby we will not simply hop into a younger version of ourselves. Furthermore, there will only ever be one active version of our avatar to avoid clone armies. And we already know what is possible with a clone army from another franchise, for the Imperium. But back to Star Citizen. So if we combine all these requirements in a system similar to cloning, we quickly realize that the traditional idea of cloning, using DNA scans and the reproduction process, would not be directly compatible with these specifications. Because of this, we find in Star Citizen an adequate and independent variant of the corresponding medical applications of the 30th century, which also brings us to one of the new core concepts: Regeneration. Here we will experience some terms and areas already with the Alpha 3.15 and more advanced mechanics than ultimately with the corresponding expansion stages. And to keep Star Citizen's own backstory, we also go into these areas partially, so that you can get an idea of CIG's intention here. And in the second section of the video, you will also get the whole background story of this new Deat of a Spaceman mechanic. Since the regeneration in the year 2951, in which we are currently in the game, is already widespread, in order to do justice to the gameplay at all, we start at the immediate past of the verse. A time in which NPC characters in the verse have been living with this regeneration for a little longer than we players have, but not very much longer. The history of regeneration and its impacts on the lives of the people in the UEE and of course beyond will also be probably incorporated into all narratives and story elements in the future. And this regeneration mechanic will be represented with the following terms and mechanics, which we will encounter everywhere in the game in the future. The imprint. Imprint is the term for a complete and holistic bioscan of an individual, creating a record not only of DNA but also of all memories, thoughts and personality of the individual. While imprints can be transferred between spheres without loss, only one copy of an imprint can exist at a time. The update of an imprint automatically overrides all previous imprints. Supposedly, it depends on the point in time at which we set this imprint in order to be able to store the experiences existing at that point in time, whereby in the game these should primarily buy reputations and further building mechanics, so to speak. Regeneration. This is the term for the process whereby a stored imprint is used to restore the decayed source. Using the information stored in the imprint, a new body is regenerated that is an almost identical copy of the original, except for the effects of any echoes, or more precisely trauma response echoes. But we will come back to this concept in detail in a few moments. The Ibrahim Sphere, or Abraham Sphere. This technology, which is available in medical beds and scanners, makes it possible to create and store imprints. This Ibrahim Sphere is made of advanced materials of extraterrestrial origin, with an underlying technology made public to allow mass production and development. However, not all spheres are created equal. Higher quality spheres are better at retaining imprints and cause less trauma during the regeneration process, allowing for more cycles before viability fails. These are ultimately the different classifications of the medbase from level 1 to level 3. The Trauma Response Echo, short TRE. Commonly referred to as an echo, this describes the connection between an imprint and the source, the character. When a major traumatic event occurs, such as ultimately a death or even regeneration itself, the physiological impact can sometimes be strong enough to permanently alter and influence this imprint. For example, if significant physiological trauma massively affects and injures a person's arms prior to their death, there is a possibility that an altered echo will be created which will change the imprint to the extent that the person's arms simply no longer function. Echoes are therefore the reason why patients can regenerate with the scars and wounds of their death, and why only one copy of a person can exist at a time. Thus, although we return from the dead, we still need a prosthesis or other treatments. In addition, regeneration itself creates echoes, which over time makes a person's imprint weaker and less viable. This is also the reason why imprints cannot be used to prolong life, as the aging process itself echoes through their imprints and has no effect on this. Unlimited life is therefore out of the question, since the aging process cannot be stopped completely. However, the effects of the echoes can be significantly reduced the higher the quality of the medical equipment. This ultimately opens up possibilities for an extension of life for all those who can afford it. So even in the 30th century, humanity is not fundamentally changing. The Impression Viability Score, IVS. This is a numerical value used to assess the viability of an imprint for regeneration, simply a timer. Due to different damage from echoes, imprints will eventually be damaged to the point where they are no longer viable, making it impossible to regenerate a character with an insufficient IV score. The use of higher quality imprints and correspondingly higher quality devices, however, contributes to the IVS of a character lasting longer. Regenerating. Regeneration describes the regeneration process itself. The cycle. This term refers to the period between regenerations. It also shows how often a character has already been regenerated. In this area, too, a variety of gameplay effects and special rewards or even restrictions would be conceivable. The gap. The term refers to the time span between the creation of an imprint and the regeneration of a character. The longer the gap, the more memories and experiences are lost. Frequent imprinting is therefore strongly recommended. This again confirms our assumption that we should imprint our character as closely as possible with the current imprint of ourselves in order to minimize negative effects in case of regeneration. The Bioticorp Regeneration Serum. This advanced pro-generative distillate is used as a base material from which cells, tissues and organs can be bioprinted for regeneration. The Wipe. And no, definitely a different term is meant here than resetting our game progress. This is the term used when a person's IVS is so low that they can no longer be regenerated. The term comes from the context of permanently erasing an imprint in an Ibrahim Sphere. Outlaws sometimes refer to erasing a person as killing them in a way that prevents them from regenerating. This can also be referred to as ghosting. This is then ultimately understood to be a real permadeath, but due to the game mechanics, this will most likely not readily come into play for player characters. Committing a murder or eliminating a character. As regeneration is still a relatively new technology, these terms still refer to the interruption of life functions, regardless of whether the person can be regenerated or not. Thus, even if an enemy is eliminated but regenerated, we are still a murderer and at most a criminal. With the upcoming mechanics and systems, the image of the medical gameplay, as well as that of a Spaceman mechanic, becomes very clear. We do not experience a classic permadeath, but have the option to continue our gameplay experience with disadvantages. Simply put, we get the character save and load function, in which we only have one save state available, which is also provided with a timer. If we let too much time pass and don't save ourselves regularly, we will be restored to a state far in the past, which can be best compared to a present-day account reset. This mechanic offers a lot of potential, but is also not unfair and forgives some mistakes, and especially currently existing game errors and bugs, after which we also have to struggle with disadvantages here, but do not have to start from scratch. So it remains very exciting to see how this enormously extensive and exciting mechanic will fit into Star Citizen. And if you are still interested in the background story of the concepts and mechanics, we will come to that now. The background story. Famed scientist Dr. A.K. Ibrahim decided his career to finding a way to restore the mental abilities of patients suffering from severe head injuries, brain trauma, or degenerative disease by taking detailed scans of their brains before the trauma. In early experience, Dr. Ibrahim was able to restore some brain functions such as motor functions, but all attempts to restore memory or personality were unsuccessful. His pioneer brain scans helped many patients regain some functionality, but when major mental loss occurred, they seemed little chance of fully restoring the person. Because of his reputation as an expert in medical scans, Dr. Ibrahim 2932 was invited by the UAE government to examine the captured Vendel biogenetic scanning technology. The recovered material was more advanced than anything the humans had developed, and even seems to surpass much of the Vendel technology previously studied. Dr. Ibrahim and his team were barely able to deconstruct the technology they found or even understand how and why the Vendel used it. It was not until a covert naval operation in 2946 that Dr. Ibrahim was able to unlock the full potential of the technology. The Ibrahim Sphere. The result of years of research and the development of advanced xenomorphic materials inspired by captured Vendel technology, the innovative Ibrahim Sphere enables the creation of complete biogenetic imprints of a person. The imprint goes far beyond DNA and mental scans to capture a complete version of a person, including their memories and even their personality. The most surprising thing, however, is that the imprint does not remain static after it has been made. It is also interesting to ask whether the apparent context of this Ibrahim Sphere, as well as the resurrection, which we find in various world religions, is intentional. Appropriate story can be found in the Christian and Muslims' faith, where Abraham's or Ibrahim's question about the resurrection of a man is dealt with, who doubts a life after that and simply consider it's impossible. Here, his God lets him experience in his own body what resurrection is, after which he dies and is resurrected after a century. For those interested, this can be read in the Surah 2 verse 260 of the Quran. And also in the Christian Bible we find something similar. Abraham judged that God was also able to raise the dead, from whence he also received him in the parable. Hebrews 11:70-19. And so the field is open for a philosophical discussion about the possibilities of a technology of the 30th century in the context of religion's views in the Star Citizen universe. Have fun, but at this point I'm going to leave this very exciting topic and return to the concept of Death of a Spaceman. The TRE, the Traumatic Response Echo. An echo is the permanent connection of a character with an imprint which cannot be explained conclusively even in the 30th century. If the source, our character, suffers drastic life experiences such as a traumatic injury or even death, the imprint is also permanently changed, which is generally referred to as Traumatic Response Echo or simply Echo. For the current leading hypotheses, CIG then reached deep into the bag of tricks of quantum mechanics and theoretical physics, according to which the unique properties of this compound resemble quantum entanglement, which links the imprint across the interstellar space to its source. While the discovery of the echoes initially left Dr. Ibrahim dismayed, as he had hoped to be able to repair patients who were still alive, a new medical chance opened up when the Ibrahim Spheres were combined with a new, breakthrough technology developed on behalf of the military by Bioticorp. The Regeneration. In 2949, the first successful regeneration of a human was achieved using rapid bioprinting technology developed by Bioticorp and information stored on Ibrahim Sphere. Emperor Edison recognized the potential of this breakthrough and authorized trillions of credits to make the technology as widely achievable as possible. He even went so far as to publish the specifications for the Ibrahim Sphere so that several companies could manufacture the necessary scanners and bioprinters. Today, the regeneration process remains costly, but even the smallest space station is equipped with a medical scanner that can make prints, and billions of lives have been saved. But as with any technology breakthrough, there are still many doubts about this technology. Religious groups have protested against capturing the soul of a living being, and some business groups have expressed concerns that the sudden extension of life will have a serious impact on society. Fears of clone armies also remain despite assurances that it is technically impossible to create multiple imprints of the same person. To counter this, the government has already passed strict laws on attempting to grow multiple versions of a person, as such a feat would upset the concept of taxation and criminal justice. Hopefully. I hope you enjoyed the video and leave me a like and maybe even a subscribe here. With the death of a Spaceman mechanic and the first version of it with the medical gameplay of Alpha 3.15, we will go to know this new system and have to deal with it in every area. The mechanics and the implementation promise many new gameplay possibilities and potential, which must also be used. Therefore, it remains to be seen how the implementation will turn out, even with the still numerous game errors. But as always, I'm interested in your opinions on the subject. What do you think about the death of a Spaceman mechanic? Let me know in the comments. But as always, the most important thing at the end, a big thank you to all supporters, whether Patreons, channel members or Twitch subscribers. Without you this wouldn't be possible, and you are an enormous motivation for which we would like to say thank you, you rock! And of course, there will be extensive and top-notch giveaways from the best partners and us again this month. You can find out how to take part and what to expect in the following announcement trailer. Good luck! I say goodbye, until next time, see you soon, and as always, see you in the verse.